Serious? When was a time you seriously feared for your life? I woke up when I was about 7. I heard some glass break downstairs. I grabbed my pocket knife that my brother gave me. Parents didn't know. I laid in bed with it held tightly to my chest. I saw the door open and threw the knife at the intruder. It hits my dad square in the face. Luckily, the knife part wasn't even out yet. He tells me that the storm shattered our table outside on the porch. I didn't sleep at all that night. I was 16, and my car broke down. I called my twin brother to come pick me up. Parents were asleep and not answering the phone. He drives up, and I gets in his car. I didn't realize this immediately, but he's under the influence of something. He keeps slamming on the brakes, flooring it to 90, then slamming on the brakes again. I start yelling at him to get the frick out of the car and to let me drive. He doesn't listen and cuts the steering wheel really hard to the right. We're going about 55 miles per hour at this point, I'd say, and we went off the road, through a ditch, and through a fence. I honestly thought we were going to die. Just last month I was walking home from my favorite bar in Syracuse. My two best buddies who I knew since first week of freshman year were with me, and we were celebrating the climatic end of our college careers. While already a bit boozed up, I still had razor sharp memory of what happened next. Two guys drove up to us, each of them brandishing a handgun. They said not a dang thing and opened fire. Got hit once in the neck, twice in the chest, and twice in the leg by paintballs. You freaking heard me. The twisted thing is that I didn't immediately notice, what with the shock and all, and the fact that the paintballs were red. So for about 6 seconds or so, I thought I was going to end college bleeding out on the sidewalk. Best part was my friend just started chuckling as if it weren't much a howdy do. It's all fun and games until they do this to someone that gets pee off enough to actually kill them. I was in Mexico, exploring an old abandoned resort. I notice an intact radio and flashlight charger on a table, both of which are on. I notice an extension cord going into another room providing them power. As any fellow urban explorers would know, coming across live power in a seemingly abandoned, secluded building is a bad sign. I leave the room immediately. As I turn to look over my shoulder, I see a man with a firearm sitting at the table that I was standing at literally 15 seconds ago. There are no words for how quickly I noped out of there. Can you give any more details? Was driving down the highway in a rental car on vacation with my dad. It was late. We were driving straight through to Florida. My dad was asleep in the passenger seat when the worst happened. At the time I didn't know what happened, but goes to find out my front left tire came off while we were going about 80 miles per hour. It started this slide to the left where nothing I did slowed or altered my course, where ultimately, we slid down the left side of the highway into a culvert. But even that big concrete drain wasn't enough to slow us down. We kept on sliding right through oncoming traffic into the far side guardrail. As we were both injured and knocked practically senseless from the multiple collisions, the culvert drain, and now this guardrail, we turned just in time to see this semi-truck coming right at us, air horn blaring. We thought it was over for both of us, for sure. Luckily, we had dented in the guardrail enough to where the back bumper was resting on the white line. The semi missed us. Never before or since have I ever been so close to death. And worse, it was something that was completely out of my control. There was nothing I could do, or could have done, to prevent it. It was weird. I walked into my neighbor's house while he was on vacation. I was house sitting, 17 years old. I fed his cat, and I remember thinking when I walked in that I had slammed the door a little too hard. I opened the door to leave, and the instant I opened the door I just got swarmed by hornets. I got stung 26 times, almost all of the stings on my head and neck. I just ran back to my house, and I guess they didn't follow me far, because when I got inside they were gone. I was kind of freaked out, but I figured I'd be okay. My mom told me we should go to the hospital, but I was like, nah, I'll be fine. I decided to go take a shower, and while I was in the shower my back and chest started hurting. Got out of the shower and walked in the living room feeling kind of dizzy and lightheaded. My mom took a look at me and her jaw just dropped. She was like, get in the car now. Apparently while in the shower my whole head started swelling, and when she saw me I looked very different. She drove me to the hospital, which was maybe 2 blocks away, and during that 2 blocks I started losing consciousness and not being able to breathe very well. I was pretty sure I was going to die. The last thing I remember was being put in a wheelchair right when I pulled up. Everything in my field of vision had a bright yellow tinge to it. I actually didn't get really scared. At one point I was just like, wow, I'm probably going to die. I'm just going to close my eyes and let it happen. So that's what I did. I came to in a hospital room a short time later. The doctor told me I had just barely made it. Crazy stuff. It's weird how scared of death I was and how at peace I seemed to be with it when it actually came. I'm a 24-year-old manly dude and I have a disproportionate fear of flying insects that sting. Wasp, bees, hornets. I'll turn into that screaming girl in every fight video on Worldstar. I was about 11 or 12. Camping out in southern Oklahoma as a Boy Scout. Tent mate was asleep, and it was probably around 3 AM. I woke up. I heard something. It sounded like a bear. Deep, throaty grunts, and it was moving around my tent. I froze. When you don't want to draw attention to yourself, you find it hard to even breath, because it makes too much noise in the dead of night. I stayed that way, frozen solid, barely breathing, for about 2 hours. It finally left, and I was able to fall asleep. Turns out in the morning when I mentioned it, it was a dog from the campsite over. There are no bears in southern Oklahoma, not that anybody was aware of anyhow. I was in my first motocross race and hit a jump too fast. I was 50 feet in the air, never done anything like this before, and I landed 90 feet down the track. I honestly thought I would die at 19 years old. Thankfully my stiff suspension absorbed the landing and left me unharmed. I had intense jitters from adrenaline for the rest of the race. And with that added adrenaline I overcame everyone else and lapped them all in my first race. Death road in Bolivia, going 50 kilometers per hour down a winding dirt road next to a 500-foot cliff. And I am not at all an avid biker. At one point I was wobbling as I approached a turn. Proper brick was shat. God, I'm a wuss biking in the city. I can't imagine. I think I was 10 or 11. I lived in a very crappy area and got into a lot of fights as a kid. Lots of gangs and drug dealers. There was a crack house about a block from where I lived and just about everyone there dealt drugs, including us kids. I also don't mean the play fighting wrestling stuff, although we did that too amongst our group. Honestly though, it feels more like we were preparing ourselves for all the fights we did get into. I was chased off the school bus by a kid with an axe once. Nearly got into a huge knife fight, all before I was a teenager. My parents were divorced and I decided to go to my mom's one weekend. I normally didn't since my mom had serious mental health issues and I didn't fully understand them at the time. It made it hard for us to communicate and it still does. I got into a fight with this kid, beat him up and he went home crying. Later that night I was out with a friend of mine. I convinced him to come with me to my mom's that weekend. It was dark and we were just running around the neighborhood being stupid shoots. We saw a group of older teenagers, maybe 17-18 years old. They were in a small circle and one of them saw us, and they immediately started running towards us. We both took off running. I was the only one that got caught. I was surrounded by them when one pulled out a gun, pulled back the trigger and placed the barrel against my temple. I barely even heard the questions they were trying to ask me. In my mind it didn't matter what I said. I was about to die. After maybe 15-20 seconds, it sure as heck felt like longer, the barrel was pulled away and they all laughed. One of them said I shouldn't frick with his little brother anymore. When they were walking away, one yelled, "The gun wasn't even loaded, you little bee." The friend that was with me was hiding underneath some bushes and saw the whole thing. I'm surprised I made it back to my mother's apartment after that happened. I remember feeling like I couldn't breathe the whole walk back, trying to make sense of what the heck just happened. Mind racing. The gun very well may not have been loaded. It doesn't change the experience of feeling a gun barrel pressed against your temple before you're even a teenager, thinking in any second you're about to die. Was involved in a car accident when I was 20. I was riding shotgun in a car of 4 people. The driver lost control of the car and plowed it into a concrete light pole at around 45 miles per hour. After the initial shock, I was able to get out of the car and start running from the wreck to a nearby firehouse. After 2 or 3 steps, My legs turned to jelly and eventually numb and had no choice but to lie on my back covered in gasoline and oil watching the driver and my friend pulling my unconscious fourth friend out of the car. This took place last summer. I was 16 and working at a summer camp in one of the more crime-ridden areas of where I live. Anyway, I was waiting at a rather busy bus stop waiting for the bus so I could go home. I was just listening to music, zoned out, not really paying attention. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around to two large men, one holding the handle of what looked like a knife in his waistband. The one without the knife looked at me and said, "Give me your wallet and your phone or my friend here is going to rip your guts out." I was shaking at this point from fear, but something in me kicked in. I just started yelling as loud as I could. I yelled, "Go ahead, stab me. I am not scared of you. Let's go." This got everyone at the bus stop's attention. A cop not 50 meters away ran up and grabbed one of the boys, while the other managed to run away. Literally as soon as the cop grabbed that kid's, I threw up from the anxiety as the cop put the kid he had now tackled on the group in handcuffs. The kid looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're gonna die, kid." Flash forward 2 weeks. At this point I got most of the legal stuff with the cops out of the way and was just trying to forget it. I heard a loud bang upstairs. It sounded like glass breaking. So I walked upstairs and peeked up and saw 3 men climbing into my house. I recognized one of them right away. It was the man who ran away from 2 weeks ago. I ran back into my basement and I hopped into the closet where we keep our holiday decorations. It locks from the inside from some dumb reason, and I just locked myself in there and called 911. Some 10 minutes later cops show up and arrest the 3 men in my house. I honestly thought I was going to die. My family moved after this took place, but I refused to be home alone anymore. You were going to die. Way to cheat death twice. I was flying on one of those cheap European discount airlines into Paris and we flew into a massive electrical storm. How they didn't see this coming I have no idea. They got on and told us they couldn't land the plane in the storm and we would have to fly to another city. Then they realized they didn't have enough fuel to make it, so we had to land in the storm. Scariest hour of my life. Plane was thrown around like a toy. Flight attendants were crying. People praying. It was unbelievable. We did manage to land. The pilots got a standing ovation from the whole plane, and I have been severely phobic of flying ever since. Visiting my college bestie. We're hanging out in her apartment, watching anime, drinking tea. Life is good. I hear a clatter behind us and see her roommate rummaging through a kitchen cabinet. She pulls out a large butcher knife, says something to the tune of "this should do it" and proceeds to go into the bathroom. Bestie was out on the patio talking to her boyfriend. I tell them this when they come back in. Bestie goes pale. This apparently is not new behavior with the roommate. Guy goes ahead and calls the cops. Bestie says she'll wait on the patio to look for them. The unit was hard to find and the area layout was weird. I go towards the bathroom to see if I can hear anything, since they decided I'm the neutral party and thus less likely to upset her. There's water running and the girl is mumbling. I ask if she's about to shower and if I could come in just for a second. I need some hair mask stuff. There was a second bathroom so I needed a better excuse. "You try to come in here and I will frickin' stab you guys down the hall." Looking ready to tackle if she does come charging at me. I spend the next 40 minutes. Cops decided we weren't super high priority, bad part of town, and hard to find anyhow. Keeping up a stream of conversation with her, from the bathroom into her bedroom, at knife point several times, with her swinging and jabbing at me. Cops came and put her under psych hold. I was basically waiting to get stabbed to death for about an hour. She was dangerous and absolutely sincere. If the guy had tried to intervene, she would have hurt me just on principle. I was 11 or so, off school on Memorial Day break. I looked up from where my dad and I were watching TV and noticed a white van in our driveway. No big deal. I figured they'd turn around. Only they didn't turn around. They were just sitting there. "Dad, there's a car in the driveway and they're not turning around." My dad peered out the window, and I noticed the van was filled with men dressed in suits. My dad turned to my brother and I, nodding. "Get in the bedroom, now." We sprinted down the hallway, diving into the master bedroom. Dad soon ducking in after us. They rang the doorbell. You could hear a freaking pin drop. I urged my dad to get the guns out of the safe, but my dad simply shushed me. We didn't want them knowing we were home. A few minutes later my dad trekked outside of the room and came back, tossing my brother a pamphlet and grinning. "Didn't wanna deal with them today," was all he said, before he went back to watching TV. My brother and I stared at the pamphlet and realized it motherfucking Jehovah's Witnesses. This happened when I was 13 years old. I was playing Kirby's Epic Yarn when my young sister and I saw someone in our backyard in a hazmat-like suit carrying a hose. My younger sister and I were the only ones home. We ran upstairs when we saw him. We didn't have our own cell phones, but our parents did. There was a landline phone in my parents' room, so we ran into that room. Here's the problem. That phone could only send calls. It couldn't receive calls. We called our dad and told him about what was happening. He told us that he would drive home and that he would yell at the door when he was unlocking it, so that we didn't think it was the guy in our backyard, and he said to call the police if the guy in our backyard tried to enter our house. I think my dad was unsure of the situation and didn't know if the guy was supposed to be here or not. Remember, my dad couldn't call us back if he wanted to. My sister and I sat in his room, afraid of what would happen next. We didn't really speak much since we were scared that we might die. I don't remember why, but I decided to call my dad again. He told us that after we called him, our mom called him, or he called our mom, and our mom told him that the exterminator would be coming to our house. That guy in our backyard wasn't a murderer. He was an exterminator. I feared for my life and for my sister's life over an exterminator. I've posted this before, but during the invasion of Iraq, I was in Qatar without my chem gear on me during a lights out, no crap alarm to run to the bunkers. Attack could likely be a Scud missile with a chemical biological payload and my gear was about 60 yards away. It was the middle of the night save for the moon out, in the middle of the desert. As we were waiting on the bunker, heart pounding in my chest, I hear my name called. My lieutenant brought me my gear. Turned out to be a false alarm, but I'll never forget what he did for me or how terrified I was. So this one time, about 2 years ago during my 3rd year of college, I got blackout drunk. I was sleeping at a friend's house that night and apparently woke up to relieve myself. In the hallway which led to the bathroom, there was also a doorway that led to the basement. Now, I don't exactly remember the events exactly, but what I've put together is that I went running to the bathroom, pulled the door open and flung myself towards the toilet. I flung myself down a flight of stairs into my friend's basement. I remember thinking to myself mid-flight, I'm gonna die. I also remember my head smacking the ground really freaking hard, reaching up, feeling my head, and looking down at my hand covered in blood. The next thing I remember was waking up on my friend's couch covered in blood, still alive, no concussion. I've got to admit, the image in my head of a drunk kid flinging themselves down the stairs is kinda hilarious. Glad you're okay, of course. My house was broken into while I was 11 and home alone. I hid in a hiding place that miraculously they didn't find, but I didn't move for hours after that. I went in the woods with a guy I barely knew and did shrooms. After a while the topic of murder came on and I became paranoid that he was going to kill me. Had my whole life flash in front of my eyes. Went in the woods with a guy I barely knew and did shrooms. After a while the topic of murder came on. Well, there's your problem. Might sound stupid, but I accidentally swallowed a large candy and it got stuck in my throat. My friend was there to help me, but if I was alone I might have suffocated. In high school I thought I was going to choke to death on jello. Thankfully it slid down after done frantic prompting. Fell headfirst on a 20+ FT cliff while hiking with friends. I fell near a rocky riverbank. I just felt my head colliding with a rock and next thing I knew I was underwater and could clearly see that the water near me turned red. I passed out, woke up to my friend dragging me out of the water. I was looking to buy some wood flooring from a guy on Craigslist. He won't give me his address but he gives me an intersection to meet him at about 5 miles into this wilderness. I meet him there and he has me follow him down a dirt road. I quickly lose cell reception and go a few miles without seeing any homes or people until 2 trucks appear behind me. I look on my GPS and there is no way to get back to a main road without turning around. After a while the road I am on isn't even on my GPS. 1 truck stays back, but the one right behind me, riding my butt, the guy I am following finally turns down a long driveway and the two trucks continue on. We arrive at this cabin and the guy says, "I bet you were getting a little worried until those two trucks came up." I didn't tell him the trucks made me feel just the opposite of safe. When I was in Afghanistan, we had some guys on a small base that was within a large Afghan National Army base. When we would go to them, we would take a regular truck and our pistol. Driving through an army base with all the dudes around just staring at you was pretty scary. Then when we would get to the gate that led us to where we needed to go, it was manned by all Afghans that didn't speak one word of English. In theory, they should have expected us because someone should tell them. This was never the case. Instead, Afghans with guns pointing them at us while yelling in Dari while I tried to tell them in Pashto where we were going. Eventually someone who understood Pashto would find their way over and let us through. Every single time it played out the same tense way. Super fun. 10/10 would do again. Throughout my deployment, during the firefights, explosions, night ops, helicopter rides, I never really feared for my life. In the moment it was a job. My training kicked in, there wasn't much conscious thought, just muscle memory. It was after the fact, after the firefight, after the convoy, after the explosions, when all the crap was over and we were smoking and joking on the base that it would hit me and I would be afraid for my life. I've posted this before, but it's appropriate for this thread. This happened when I was 22 or so and living in Jacksonville, FL. I was late getting out of work and missed my bus. I had been running for it, but was just a few seconds too late. A car pulled up in front of me and asked if I needed a ride. He was normal looking, probably in his late 20s or early 30s and about my size, maybe a little bigger. I'm 5'9" and at the time probably weighed around 155. As a young man in the early 1990s, I knew people shouldn't get rides from strangers, but figured the guy looked alright and he said we can catch the bus, so I hopped in. He started talking right away, just making small talk while trying to catch up to the bus. He mentioned something about God and being religious, and then I noticed he passed the bus. He said he was going to drop me off at a stop up the road, and the bus would catch up in a few minutes, and went back to talking about God and asking me if I had roommates or lived alone. I noticed then that he was heading off the main drag and heading out of downtown. I started getting worried as his conversation became more intense and erratic. I told him to drop me off right here, and he just kept on talking. He asked if I needed to be cleansed. By now I was quietly panicking. He said he knew I wasn't clean and he wanted to show me the way. I forcefully told him to stop the freaking car and he backhanded me across the face. He said he was going to teach me how to be clean. We must have been going around 35 miles per hour then. I wanted to jump out of the car but wondered if I'd break something and be unable to run, or if I'd get hit by another car. As I was debating this, he opened up the glove box and pulled out a big sponge. One of those natural ones. He said my mouth needed to be cleaned out and to stuff it in my mouth. I saw the roll of tape in the glove box and knew where this was going. Without further ado, as he was taking a corner, I pulled the handle and jumped the frick out. I rolled a couple times and had nothing more than a skinned knee and a couple scratches. There were other cars on the street and a few people around, and that mother pulled the door closed and drove off fast. I was in shock for a while. I ended up telling my co-workers about it and one of them took me to the police station to file a report. Never heard anything about it again. TLDR. I think I almost became a victim of a serial killer. When I was a freshman in high school, my parents decided they wanted a pool, but my father really liked our big backyard, so they found endless pools, which are like water treadmills. But if they were going to get one of those, my father wanted it to be enclosed, so we were going to add an extra room to the house. And since we were doing that, why not just add an entire extra floor to the rest of the house, and a few more related projects. Consequently, we spent a good portion of my high school years with tarps over where the roof should be. One day, it was time to do some work near the top beam. We'd been focusing on other stuff for a while and hadn't uncovered it in a few months. We're finally up there, standing on the part of our house that still had a roof, and we roll the tarp off the beam, and the entire beam is covered in wasps. Hundreds of thousands of wasps. For a split second there, I was pretty sure we were going to die, and I very nearly tumbled off the roof out of shock. But lucky for us, It was deep winter and just super cold that day, and it was cold enough that they weren't aggressive at all. We got down, got several cans of wasp spray, and sprayed the whole beam, which was also pretty scary. Didn't even get stung. Hundreds of thousands of wasps rolled past us down the roof. Conducting an offshore boarding. Missed the boat when a wave came and dropped the stern fast and fell with it. Thought Jay was gonna get crushed between both boats. My buddy caught me seconds beforehand. Hurt like a bee, but small price for what could have happened. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.